Hello, this is lesson 11, Speciation, from the B6 inheritance topic, and it's for our biology triple students only. So if you're doing combined, you can move straight on to lesson 12. My name's Mrs. Keenan, and I'm a director for Outward Grange Academies Trust. To start us off, I just want you to think what is meant by the term species and how might a new species occur, and I'm just going to give you 30 seconds. Okay, did you manage to come up with anything? So the word species, the actual definition, is the smallest group of clearly identified organisms within Linnaeus's classification system, often described as a group of organisms that can breed together and produce fertile offspring. How might a new species occur is a more difficult question. And hopefully by the end of the lesson, you'll have some more ideas about that. So we're going to come back onto that later. So our outcomes for today. We're going to describe Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, and we're going to explain factors that can give rise to a new species. So evolution is the development of a species over many generations. A species is a group of organisms able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So evolution is the changing of species over generations, and a species is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. And the diagram there shows the evolution of ape to man, and we're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail along with the theory of natural selection. So two scientists, Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, jointly came up with a theory of evolution by natural selection. Charles Darwin carried out studies on finches, and he looked at the beak size of those finches, the shape of those beaks, and he compared these to the diet the finches ate and the location that they lived in and the conditions they lived in. Alfred Wallace is best known for his work on the coloration of animals and the way that some animals have particular colours or can change colours as a warning system to other animals. And he worked on the theory of speciation. The concept of natural selection was first published in 1858 by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, and it was in a joint presentation of papers. Then Darwin went on to write the famous Origin of Species, which was a paper written in 1859, which went into more detail about the origin of species and evolution. So when we talk about evolution and the theory of evolution, the first name that often comes to people's mind is Charles Darwin. But actually, Alfred Wallace did some work with Darwin at the beginning, and his ideas are still recognised. So Alfred Wallace, we're going to start off with. He made observations that the warning colours used by some species to deter predators and stop them from eating them. And he decided that this characteristic, these warning colours, were of benefit to the animal because they deterred predators, so stopped them becoming their prey. And he did a lot of work on the evolution of these warning colour characteristics over generations by natural selection. And the characteristic is said to be a beneficial characteristic because it was obviously stopping them from being eaten by predators. So it was benefiting the species that could develop these characteristics. So I just want you to have a think for a second. There's 5 statements and some missing words. This paragraph summarises the theory of natural selection. I'm just going to give you 1 minute to see what words you can come up with to the gaps. If you just number them 1 to 7 and see what you can come up with. Okay, how did you go on? So the first statement, members of a species show variations. Some of this variation is genetic. Individuals which have features suited to their environment are said to have a survival advantage. These individuals are more likely to survive and reproduce, and the genes for these beneficial features are passed on to the next generation. I'm just going to read through that again. Members of a species show variations. Some of these variations are down to genetics. Individuals which have features suited to their environment are said to have a survival advantage. These individuals are more likely to survive and reproduce, so then the genes for these beneficial features are passed on to the next generation. And this is known as evolution by natural selection. Okay, so there's 4 pictures here of animals, and I want you to think about what these animals have in common and how might this give them a survival advantage. And I'm just going to give you 1 minute. Okay, so the animals have these brightly coloured markings in common, and it might give them a survival advantage because the markings might deter predators and scare them away. And they might look poisonous, so they might not be as keen to eat them. So we're going to think then back to a question I asked you at the beginning. And how might a new species occur? And what could happen that would result in this happening? So I'm just going to give you 1 minute just to think about the theory of natural selection, what we've gone over so far, and to put your ideas together for how a completely new species may occur. And remember, a species has to be able to successfully breed with other individuals from the same species. If it was a new species, they would no longer be able to successfully breed. 1 minute starting now. So, speciation is the formation of a new species. It occurs when populations of the same species become so different that they can no longer successfully interbreed to produce fertile offspring. But how does it happen? Well, what happens is the original population can become isolated. So one group of the population can become isolated from another. Conditions can change, and those two species can be exposed to different conditions, which can cause them to evolve in slightly different ways because they have different beneficial characteristics. And eventually, over generations and generations and generations, those species would evolve so much that they would be so different that they could no longer be classed as the same species. In any population, there are genetic variations. So there's a wide range of different genes controlling the characteristics within a species. In each population, certain alleles are selected and control characteristics, and some of those characteristics will help the organisms to survive and breed. And this is just the process of natural selection that we've just talked about. But sometimes, if part of a population becomes isolated because of new environmental conditions, alleles for characteristics that enable organisms to survive and breed successfully in the new conditions will now be advantageous, so they will be selected. These may be different from the alleles that gave success in the original environment. So as a result of these different advantageous characteristics being selected, there'll be greater variation between the population. Eventually, the characteristics will change so much that individuals from one group within the species can no longer interbreed to produce fertile offspring with the other population. And we say a new species has been formed and the process of speciation has took place.
What are the processes that lead to speciation? Well, listen and I'll tell you the first rule. A group needs to get cut off from other populations and isolate their very own gene pool. Well, it could be a mountain and you're on the other side. It could be a river that's a little bit too wide. You could fly away from them, although it could carry on just as long as there's a gene barrier. So you've got your little gene pool and you think you're in the game. Well, it don't mean nothing if your genes just stay the same. But with a little variation and natural selection, your allele frequency moves you in a new direction. Now your group has seen some changes and some folks are gonna ask,
is that a whole new species?
to answer is our task. Genealogical concept backs your independent history, but to prove you're biological, you need to get frisky. Well, you could be the other group, but you might not have a chance. Your key don't fit the lock, or you don't do the dance, or the fusion of your gametes is prevented by a hurdle, or your hybrid offspring are dead or infertile. I hope this song provides you with a valuable summation of the things you need to know about speciation.
Okay, so I like that little video. I think it sums it up quite nicely. So I'm just going to give you 1 minute to summarise the process of speciation, and I would like you to try and use 10 words or less. 1 minute, off you go. Okay, that's quite a tough challenge. So some of the words you might have used. Okay, if you struggled to come up with a summary of speciation, there's some words and statements here that might help you. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to highlight or underline any of those words you might have already got, or add them to the activity you've just completed. Okay, so here's a diagram that summarises speciation. You've got two populations of the same species. The black dots represent individual organisms. Then a physical barrier is created to separate the populations, and this might be due to some tectonic activity. The populations then adapt to the new environments. So different characteristics might be advantageous in each different location, and eventually a completely new species is being developed. So speciation comes up quite a lot on exam questions. So I'm not going to read this to you, but I'm just going to give you 1 minute to have a read and see if you can come up with one reason why the scientist's opinion may be correct. Okay, time's up. So just to read through it, the illustration below shows two types of pistol shrimp. It doesn't matter if you know nothing about pistol shrimps, they're just trying to catch you out. The shrimps live in shallow tropical seas on opposite sides of Panama. So you've got type A on the left in the Pacific Ocean and type B on the right in the Caribbean Sea. Scientists put one type A shrimp and one type B shrimp together in a tank of seawater. The two types of shrimp snapped their claws aggressively at each other and did not mate. The scientists said this was evidence for type A and B shrimps being classed as two different species. Give one reason why the scientist's opinion may be correct. So what did you come up with? The only evidence you have been given is that shrimp A and B did not mate. So the scientist is saying they may be classed as two different species. The evidence for that is because they did not mate. So, suggest 2 reasons why the scientist's opinion may not be correct. I'm going to give you 1 minute again. Okay, what did you come up with? So we're looking for reasons why the scientist's opinion may be incorrect. So it may not be the mating season. So it might not be the right time of year for these individuals to mate. A and B might simply not find each other attractive, and that's why they've not mated. This is just a one-off attempt. It could be an anomalous result. They might need repeats. Or they could just be immature shrimps that aren't ready to mate, or are juveniles. So there's lots of other reasons why these 2 shrimps may not have mated, other than they may no longer be the same species. They might be the same sex. So there might be 2 females or 2 males together, which are then not going to be able to mate. I want you to look at this picture for a second then, and I want you to think about what this animal is and why might it have become extinct. 1 minute. Okay, so that picture is of a dodo. And a dodo was a large flightless bird that used to be around but is now extinct. And there's been many reasons why people think the dodo became extinct. But one of the most believed reasons is because more species, new species, were fetched to the habitats they lived in, and they actually fed off the eggs, and the dodos then didn't reproduce successfully. And there's more about the dodos and extinction in one of the B7 lessons. Going back to the dodo then for a second. The dodo was a large flightless bird that lived on the island of Mauritius. It nested on the ground in forests and only produced 1 egg at a time. When human settlers arrived on the island in the mid-1600s, they brought animals such as rats and dogs to the island, which ate the dodo's eggs. The settlers chopped down the forests in which the dodos lived and may have even hunted them for food. The dodo became extinct sometime in the late 1600s, but what traits may have helped the dodo to survive longer? 30 seconds. What traits or characteristics may have allowed the dodo to avoid becoming extinct? Okay, so if the dodo was able to fly, it may have been able to get away from the humans that were trying to hunt it, so that would have been an advantage. If a dodo laid more than one egg, then some of the eggs may have survived and not been stolen by the rats, so then it might have gone on to reproduce. Perhaps if the dodo was a little bit smaller, then it would have been easier to hide and be more camouflaged in the trees and less easy to catch for the humans to hunt. If the dodo could have survived in habitats other than forest land, when the trees were chopped down, it may not have been killed off because it would have had other places it could have lived. Perhaps if it had a sharper beak, it could have defended itself better, or better eyesight might have made it easy for it to catch its prey, or sharper claws may have allowed it to defend itself better. So there's lots of characteristics that could have perhaps made the dodo's life a little bit easier, and then it would have been less likely to become extinct. So why might a species such as a dodo become extinct? 30 seconds, just jot down some ideas. Okay, so there's lots of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that the environment or the habitat that the species lives in may change. Another reason might be that there's new predators introduced into the environment. It might eat the eggs, as we thought was the case with the dodo, or might just predate on the animals themselves. New diseases could wipe out whole species in a relatively short amount of time. And there might be new, more successful competitors. Now, finally, there might be a natural disaster, such as a volcano or an asteroid. New predators could wipe out unsuspecting prey animals very quickly. If the prey animals don't have adaptations to avoid them, new predators may have evolved, or an existing species might simply move into new territory. Sometimes this can be due to human interventions. Hedgehogs were introduced to the Scottish island of Northwest in 1974 to combat the problem of garden slugs. Unfortunately, the hedgehogs bred very quickly, and they ate the eggs and chicks of many rare seabirds that bred on the island. Now people are trying to kill or remove the hedgehogs from the island to save the birds. New diseases can bring species to a point of extinction. They are most likely to cause extinctions on islands where the whole population of an animal or plant is very close together. An example of this is the Australian Tasmanian devil. These were rare animals are dying from a new form of cancer that attacks and kills them very quickly. Another reason, new, more successful competitors. So new mutations can give one type of organism an advantage over another, and then these individuals can outcompete other individuals. This may mean that a new, more successful competitor can take over an area of land or take over a habitat and cause the original population to become extinct. An example of this is in Australia. The introduction of rabbits caused severe problems because they ate so much and bred so fast that other native Australian animals died out because they couldn't compete with the rabbits for food. For speciation. Two populations of a species become separated due to a change in landscape, a volcano, or some other reason. Each group lives in different environmental conditions, so they are suited to the environment in different ways. This means different characteristics will be advantageous, so they will evolve differently due to natural selection. Eventually, the two groups will be so different we can say speciation has occurred, resulting in a completely new species that can no longer successfully interbreed with the original species. If you want to pause the video and get that down, it's a good summary of speciation.